Hi, my name's Paddy Nixon. I'm the Vice-Chancellor here at the University of Canberra, and I'm here to talk to Michelle about a week in politics. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Paddy.
Look, a fascinating week. We've got the budget coming next week, and everybody's indicating that quite clearly that we've started the ramp up for the election, that there'll be a call for the election not long after that. Mm-hmm. We're not quite sure of the date, but we're pretty certain it'll happen if they're going to make sure that they meet their May deadline.
Yes, we know it's in the month of May.
That's absolutely the case. So obviously the budget is a key thing next week, and it will be used to try and redress some of the losses the Morrison government have made in recent times, and to encourage voters. Have we got any signals of what's likely to be in the budget?
We do know that cost of living and an attempt to provide some relief on that front will be a main feature of the budget. This issue has really escalated recently with rising inflation and the prospect, of course, of interest rates going up later in the year. So the government is very aware that particularly in outer suburban seats, people are feeling the pinch, and so there'll be measures. Now, what these measures are, that's as yet unclear. There's speculation about a cash payment for low and middle income earners, and there's been continual talk about possible action to do something on petrol. That was strong a while ago, then it receded when people said that wouldn't be good policy. It now appears to be back on the table, but you wouldn't want to be betting on that at the moment, one way or the other.
And do we think this is going to have any significant impact on voter preferences at this time?
That's really hard to say. I think it does give the government a chance to reset the conversation and to play up economic management, which is a stronger area for the coalition than some other policy areas. But the extent to which the vote is baked in at the moment, you can't really measure that because people do get affected by the campaign itself when they start to concentrate. Of course, we are in the continuous campaign, but I think many people would be really tuning out of that and just hearing it as a lot of background noise.
And then we've just recently heard that the Australian government has accepted the offer from the New Zealand government to resettle refugees 9 years after the original offer was made, and obviously there's been commentary on the impact that's had on the refugees. Why has it been made at this point in time, and what do we read into it?
This will be 150 people a year in each of 3 years, so a total of up to 450 people. I think what we read into it is that the government has wanted to, as the saying goes in political circles, clear away a barnacle before the election. And it does probably almost certainly feels, that the question of refugees is an issue in the leafy suburb seats where independent candidates, often women, are challenging Liberal Party members. And these so-called teal candidates, a bit of blue, a bit of green, are presenting a problem. I think it's thought unlikely that more than, say, one, maximum two, would actually get in to Parliament, but nevertheless they're diverting resources and they are presenting a problem for the Liberal Party, and this is just one measure that the government hopes might mollify electors in those seats. It's rather outrageous, more than rather outrageous. It's very outrageous, I think, that this offer wasn't accepted many years ago. The government's argument was that this would be a pull factor, and also it said that these people, when they came to New Zealand, would then be later able to come to Australia. And the policy is that nobody who comes to Australia by boat will ever settle permanently in this country. But they were very inadequate arguments, really.
And Scott Morrison was the immigration minister at the time when these policies were put in place. Is this part of, as you say, removing the barnacle that reflects on him?
Oh, the government is still strongly arguing the case for tough border policy, and it's maintaining that this is really no change to that policy. So I think that it's really a political fix, addressing what it sees as a political problem rather than any real change of heart. Certainly not that.
And then just moving to South Australia, obviously the election there happened we got the results last week, and we now have a Labor government. It's the first change of government during pandemic times. What does this tell us? Can we learn something about the election to come, or is this a particularly state-based outcome?
Well, it is a state-based outcome because the state opposition in South Australia presented its case very strongly. It had a charismatic leader, and the Marshall Liberal government, I think people just felt that it wasn't presenting much for the future. They'd had a few scandals. Also, they opened the border at the very time that the Omicron wave hit, and that fed into the campaigning too, which was substantially, from Labor's point of view, about hospitals and ambulance ramping. In terms of COVID, I think it does show that incumbency is no longer a protection and an advantage for governments. It sort of, in a way, puts a full stop, as it were, in political terms over the COVID era, or maybe a strong semicolon, because we never know whether there'll be another wave.
And then, obviously, we've all been touched by the death of Kimberly Kitching. Over the last week, we've seen that Anthony Albanese has been dogged by allegations of bullying in the party. Has he dealt with those?
I don't think he has dealt with them very effectively. I think he was really wrong-footed at the start when these allegations came out so strongly against the Senate leadership. The three women Senate leaders from Labor, they of course totally deny these allegations, but they were made very toughly and widely by the late Senator's friends and allies, and I think that Anthony Albanese initially thought it would all blow over very quickly, then it didn't. Now he's still getting questions on this. I think from his point of view, it'll be the budget that'll be the what draws the line and moves the journalists on to other issues. But one of the problems, of course, for him is that he and Labor generally went so hard against Scott Morrison and the government over issues of how women were treated, particularly one woman MP who defected from the Liberals. And so he's being accused of hypocrisy because he won't have an inquiry. But I think all he can do now is just wait for this to really subside and be overcome by other issues.
So we touched on Teal candidates earlier. Research by the University of Canberra has been investigating the Sydney seat of Wentworth, where the incumbent Liberal member is being challenged by an independent, a Teal independent. What are we learning from this research poll?
The battle here is between Dave Sharma, who's a Liberal moderate, and Allegra Spender, who is from a very Liberal family. Her father and her grandfather were both federal members of Parliament, and grandfather was a senior minister. What we learned in this research was that the Liberals got a nose in front, but it was a close contest. It is quantitative research, and it also indicated that in this inner Sydney seat, very much a seat concerned with the issues of climate and integrity and so on, the sort of issues that the independents are running on in this and other seats. It was interesting that climate came out as the top of the issues when people were asked what was the most important issue that would influence their vote, and they were given a list of half a dozen, and climate was well ahead of the others. So I think that's notable for this seat. Also, what we found was that Scott Morrison was pretty unpopular and the government was not regarded as doing a particularly good job. And interestingly, Anthony Albanese was preferred Prime Minister by a modest margin over Scott Morrison. So it's going to be a battle in that seat. I think the Liberals would be reasonably encouraged by Dave Sharma's position at the moment, but not yet confident at all. And clearly what Dave Sharma has to do is campaign, as it were, on his own, and he's a bit burdened by his leader. What Allegra Spender has to do is get better known, because the figures were showing that she is, at this point, not widely known. I might say that this first round of the research is reported in The Conversation, if I could put it in an ad there, but we are going to do focus group research, and that will be reported during the campaign. So the university is following this seat right through from now.
And just for my interest, is this seat a strong Liberal seat, historically a relatively safe seat? Is it one that will be a bit of a gauge of how Liberal are doing more generally across the nation?
It's not a gauge of how they will be doing against Labor, but it is a gauge in terms of these teal independents. Historically, this is a Conservative seat. But after Malcolm Turnbull, who held this seat, was overthrown as leader, it did go independent. So I think the voters in Wentworth are folk of strong opinion. And therefore, it is interesting when the Liberals are up against a candidate who will be well financed by the Climate 200 movement and has a name, and will get known over the coming weeks, widely known over the coming weeks.
Well, next week's a big week with the budget, and then it will be lots of big weeks as we go through the election campaign. So I'm looking forward to talking to you during that time. It'll be a fascinating set of conversations, and not with a guaranteed outcome either way. So we'll be on the edge of our seat all the way through, I suspect.
Indeed. Thanks, Paddy.
Thank you.